So thanks again for giving up your Tuesday evening to join me for this session. And I'm really glad that you're here to learn about managing money. Budgeting is extremely important, especially in these uncertain times. And I think most of you, if not all of you, at least know someone that has been affected by what I call these COVID times, either losing their job altogether or losing maybe a part-time job that they have. And things have been financially hard for a lot of people, myself included, having been affected by the COVID situation. Now, what experts have always recommended is that you save enough money to cover your take-home income, and that's the income that you get in your hand after all your deductions, that covers 3 to 6 months of your take-home income. And that's in the event that if you're suddenly without any income at all. That'll give you time to rebuild your income and rearrange your finances in case there's an emergency. Now, what these uncertain COVID times have taught us is that you're probably looking more like 9 to 12 months is the kind of savings that you want to have in these times, because, you know, it's over 1 year later, we're still in shutdown, businesses are still closing. So it's really important that we try and have that savings put down. Now, and it's not important not only to have financial knowledge, but to develop the confidence and the skills to manage your finances. Now, we've all heard those horror stories of celebrities and athletes who have made millions and lost it because they have relied on other people to manage their finances. I'm not expecting everybody to be, you know, financial experts, but knowing is an important part of that. And I can tell you how budgeting has affected my life. When I first met my husband many, many moons ago, one of the first things we discussed was actually a financial plan. And we had short-term goals, we had mid-range goals, and we also had a long-term goal. One of our short-term goals were we wanted to go on vacation because, you know, a good break after working full-time jobs, good little break at least once a year, that was our short-term goal. Our midterm goal was savings and paying down our mortgage because we had recently bought a house. And our long-term goal, as young as we were at that time, and some of you may still be in high school, you know, but it's never too early to think about retirement, right? Because if some of you that have attended our previous sessions on finances, we can see how money can grow and how we can use that money. So as young as you are, you may say, I'm not in high school, what do I care about retirement? It's never too early to start for retirement, to save for retirement. So those were our short-term goals. I made out a plan, I made out a budget based on how much money we were bringing in, what our expenses were like. And I said, okay, with this money, this is what we're gonna do, allocating it to the various goals, the various lengths goals. And I can tell you, 8 years after starting that budget, we paid off our mortgage. And the next month, I had my twins. So that freed up that money that I was putting in my mortgage. Now I could now put into my children because I knew that would have been additional expenses I could have. So I cannot sing enough the praises of having a budget and sticking to it. The rewards are immense. Now, people are often hesitant to set budgets because they feel it's going to restrict them from doing what they want to do and stop them from enjoying life. But it's important to set goals and stay focused. Working towards and achieving our goal is a wonderful feeling, and it also gives us that incentive to stick to the budget. And it's also very, very satisfying when you actually achieve it. Now, do you know that 2/3 of Canadians are carrying debt outside of their mortgages, and 1/3 of those are having difficulty in making those minimum payments? So that's the kind of situation that we are in currently. So the aim of this particular session is to provide helpful and objective information, knowledge and skills that you can put into practice, as well as various tools that will help you. Now, what are some of the benefits of gaining financial skills? Knowing how to manage your money will protect you financially and help you reach your goals. Okay, so gaining financial skills, you control your financial future. It'll help you achieve your life goals. You'll be able to provide for yourself and your family. You become a smarter consumer. It reduces a lot of stress and you sleep a lot better, because a lot of people, when they're financial difficulties or they're having financial hard times, they lose a lot of sleep. It's a lot of stress. How am I going to cover my mortgage? How am I going to pay for school if I'm a university student? What am I going to do when I finish school, or where am I going to go? Because, some people say at 18, if you're in your house, you got to be paying rent. If you're going to stay there, you got to be contributing. And it also, gaining financial skills, you're more confident that you can manage your finances. Now, many people face financial challenges today that would have been different from your parents, from your grandparents, and we think, oh my gosh, I'll never be able. A good example is, I'll never be able to buy a home because of the cost and how it has risen, especially in the Toronto area for a very long. It's really risen a lot in the last couple of years. Houses that you see maybe 10 years ago for $200,000, those houses are now $1 million. And you're saying, okay, well, I'll never be able to afford it. I'll be like 90 by the time I can afford a house. But that's not so, because we have the tools and the technologies that we can use. And using those tools will help us still achieve those goals, that we can have the things that our parents had, and even more. But what is important is that I was reading an article several months ago, and it was a very, very interesting article. The heading of the article was, I'm 25, I live with my parents, and I own 20 rental properties. And that really, really caught my attention. And it was about this young man, an immigrant to Canada. Dad had a 6th grade education, didn't have a lot of money growing up. He lived in Scarborough. But one thing his parents always did was stress the importance of education. That was big in his household, education. So after he graduated from school, he read this book that really influenced him. And this book talked about retirement. So just graduated from school, probably around 21, 22, and he's thinking about retirement, right? So it's never too early. And it says, if you have passive income, which is basically income that income that you earn without having to be too actively involved, it can lead to possibilities of you being able to retire, or giving you that lifestyle that you want. He also watched some YouTube videos of investing in real estate, doing some research online, and graduated from the university in 2017. After he had an internship or apprenticeship, and after that, after he paid off his schooling loans, he had a couple $1,000s left. He bought his first home. Now, when he was thinking about investing, when we think about investing, sometimes we think about Toronto. And he even says, it's quite funny, with the kind of money I had, it was like probably about $30,000. He said, I couldn't even buy half a parking spot in downtown Toronto. And it was probably true. But what he did was, he bought a house in Windsor. And that was his first property. And then it just mushroomed from there. And the money he earned from that, he bought other properties. He got into some partnerships with friends. They bought other properties. And now he has 20 properties. He says, from the properties, after paying off all the mortgages, he still has $4,000 a month that he has going into his savings. He still has a full-time job in Toronto. He has people managing. And yes, he was affected when COVID hit. But financially, he knew, okay, well, I know this is I might have overextended myself. But what he did was, he reached out to all his tenants and said, if you're having difficulties paying, I will work out some credit with you and see what you can pay. And let's come to some arrangement, because those are people in his place. So financially knows they may not be getting full rent, but he's getting partial rent. But what the real thing of this story is that this gentleman he knew what he wanted. He knew his financial goals. He did the research he had to do, and he did have financial knowledge. So think about what some of your financial goals may be as we go to session, because it makes it easier to budget and put money aside and save and live within our means when we have a goal. So it's all important to set a goal. Now, before proceeding, we're going to do a couple questions, a couple of poll questions that we're going to put up. And Alamedy, can let's see what we have. So the first one is what percentage of Canadian households use a budget to manage your finances? everybody responded? Can you see? Okay, so can you tell me the results? Because I don't see. Okay, 32%. The answer is actually 46% of Canadians say that they use a budget of some sort. So a written budget helps you manage your spending, prepare for your future, especially when your money is limited. And all of us have a limited pool of money that we have, right? So it also helps you decide what you're going to spend on, avoid overspending, and helps you set aside money for things that you really need. So let's put up the next question. So in 2017, the average household debt of Canadians was. Okay, the average household debt is Canadians. The answer for the average household debt of Canadians in 2017 was $158,000. We're talking about 2017. Now, and that includes, when we talk about the household debt, this was outstanding balances on credit cards, mortgages, loans, and lines of credit. Okay, what is really scary and is of note is that the average household debt increased by 39% between 2013 and 2017. So it went from 114,000 to 158,000. And we're in 2021 now, and I can tell you that that number is a lot higher, especially with these COVID times where people have had to incur a lot more debt just to make ends meet and keeping their heads above water. The third question. This is a little easier one. Okay, see, 100%. Great, right? So in 2018, 1 in 5 working Canadians said that they could not come up with $2,000 within a month for an emergency expense. So setting aside money in an emergency fund is the best strategy for dealing with unexpected expenses, a sudden drop in your income, or other changes in your personal finances. So everyone needs a financial plan, no matter how much money you have or how much money you make. In an IG Wealth Management poll that recently came out, and it said that 45% of the people who did not have a financial plan prior to the pandemic will now put one in place. And 46% of those who did have a plan are forced to revise their numbers. It also said that only 21% of Canadians reported having a really good awareness of their overall financial wealth. So you need to know where you stand financially. If you don't have a roadmap, it's pretty hard to take corrective action. So based on our little poll that we did, how many of those questions did you get right? How many did you get wrong? Did any of the answers surprise you? Did you recognize yourself in any of the stats that, you know, and if you did recognize yourself in some of the stats, you're in the right place. All in all, and as the young people would say, and I know I'm going to embarrass my daughter by saying this, it's important that you stay woke when it comes to your finances. And I hope I used it right. She's probably cringing.
You did.
Okay, yay. Okay, so budgeting is the first step in managing your money. It's not hard, it's not complicated, or it's not full of sacrifice. The first step in managing your money is knowing what's coming in, where it's going out, and making sure that the ins exceeds the outs. So you have enough money for your needs, you can save and invest to your future. There's nothing difficult about budgeting. Budgeting does not mean doing without. It's just an organized way to manage your money. So what is a budget? It's basically a financial outline designed to measure and guide your income and expenditures for a certain period of time, such as a month, a year, a quarter. And in short, it's a spending plan. And it's a way of balancing your expenses with your income. So creating this spending plan allows you to determine in advance whether you'll be able to have enough money to do what you need to do or what you would like to do. There's several different budgeting systems, and I'm going to go over the various budgeting systems. There's a 50-30-20. There's an envelope system. There's a pay yourself first system. There's another one called zero-based budgeting, and I'll talk all about that later. But also, there's also budgeting apps. Like there's several budgeting apps that you can use. You can do the old-fashioned way, paper and pencil. You can use Excel spreadsheet, but whatever works for you. There are always several different things that you can use when it comes to budgeting. So I'm going to list 10 benefits of budgeting. Number one, it gives you control over your money. So budget is a way of being intentional about the way you spend and save your money. It's said that with budgeting, you control your money and not your money controlling you. So budgeting saves you the stress of suddenly having to adjust to lack of funds because you didn't initially plan on how to spend them. It also helps you decide if you want to sacrifice short-term spending, like buying a coffee every day from Starbucks or Tim Hortons, in exchange for a long-term benefit. Like if you're saving for a car, you're saving for a vacation. Budget also keeps you focused on your money goals. You avoid spending unnecessarily on items and services that do not contribute to you attaining your financial goal. So if you're working with limited resources, budgeting makes it easier to make ends meet. It also makes you aware of what is going in and what is going on with your money. With budgeting, you're clear on what is coming in and more importantly, how fast it's going out and where it's going to. Because we also hear at the end of the month, people say, well, I don't know where my money went. You spend it, you don't keep track of it. And then wait a minute, you're living paycheck to paycheck because you don't know where your money is going. So budgeting saves you from wondering every end of the month where your money went. A budget enables you to know what you can afford. It helps you enable you to take advantage of buying and investing opportunities and also in planning to lower your debt. It also tells you what is important to you based on how you allocate your funds, how your money is working for you, and how far you are towards reaching your financial goals. It also helps you organize your spending and your savings. By dividing your money into categories or expenditures and savings, a budget makes you aware of which category of expenditure takes which portion of your money. That way, it's easy for you to make adjustments. So budgets also serve as a reference for organizing your bills, receipts, and financial statements. And when all your financial transactions are organized for tax time or for creditor questions, if you're going for a loan, it also saves you a lot of time and effort because everything is there. You know exactly what you'll get the questions from if you're going to bank to get a loan. They're going to be asking questions. They want to know that before I lend you money, what is the habits of this person that I'm lending the money to? It also makes you decide in advance how your money will work for you. It enables you to save for unexpected or expected costs. Budgets allows you to plan to set aside money for emergencies, right? Because a lot of the times I've heard, many years ago, or talking to some of my friends, well, I need to get this done. And it may be an important thing that they need to do, but they don't have the funds right now to do it. And borrowing can be very expensive. So although it's something that they need to do, they have to wait until they get the money to be able to do it. It also enables you to communicate with your significant others about money. Like I told you earlier on, I set the goals with my husband when we first got together. And that was very important because we had very different goals. I am the saver, he is the spender. So having that budget, especially if you were with a partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is, it helps you because you can be on the same page and you can reach some kind of agreement, right? It promotes teamwork on working for a common financial goals, and it also prevents conflicts on how money is used. because a lot of people, many relationships are broken because of this financial issue. People have different goals, different spending, and it's very, very important that you creating a budget in tandem with your spouse or better half. It will avoid conflicts and resolve personal differences on how your money is spent. So budgeting teaches family members spending responsibility, but not only spending responsibility, accountability as well. It provides you with an early warning for potential problems. So when you budget and take a big picture view, you'll see potential money problems in advance and be able to make adjustments before the problem appears. It helps you determine if you can take debt and how much. So taking debt is not necessarily a bad thing if the debt is necessary or you can afford it. But budgeting shows you how much of a debt load you can realistically take without being stressed, or if taking the debt load is worth it at all. And finally, it enables you to produce extra money. In budgeting, you get to identify and eliminate unnecessary spending, like late fees, penalties, and interests. And these seemingly small savings can add up over time. And I remember one year I had my credit card bill, and I'm one of those people that I try to pay my credit card bill in full, because if you don't pay that credit card bill, you put something on your credit card, you don't pay it in full. Even if you pay, say it's $1,000, you pay $900, the interest that they're calculating is going to be on that $1,000. So even though you paid that $900, the interest that they're charging you is going to be on the full amount that's owed for that month. And I remember one year, I don't remember what it was, I missed the day by about 2 or 3 days. Of course, I was absolutely crushed. How could I miss it? Like, I always paid my bills on time. This was like the end of the world moment for myself. And what bothered me more than anything else is that just by missing that by 2 days, it was $40. Like $40 just for 2 days. It was the first time that it happened. I did call the bank and I did, say, please check my payment record. I've never missed a bill before. Please, 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 beg, grovel, grovel, grovel. And they said, you know what, since you're a good customer, we'll reverse it this time. And they did. But I'm just saying, those little things can add up over time, and you'll be surprised the cost of spending if by making late payments, not making full payments, or even if you have to take a loan and the high interest rates you may end up having to pay on those loans. So what are the different parts of the budget? As I said, it's very simple. You look at your income, you look at your expenses, and then you subtract your expenses from your income. And if your income is more than expenses, you're in a better position. You're in a surplus position. And if your expenses are more than your income, you're in what we call a deficit position. Okay. So to do a budget, you need to know what you make and what you spend on each month. Okay. Most of us have a pretty good idea of what our income is, but we're a little fuzzy on how we spend, or what we spend it on, right? That's why you need to keep a record of what you spend. So in preparing for doing a budget, you should keep every receipt, right? Or record every expense in a notebook or an electronic device. Review your bank statements. So your bank and your credit card statements, because a lot of us, we use debit cards now, especially in COVID times, we're not using with cash, which makes it a lot easier to track money because we can see where we spend it. So it will jog our memory, or by the way, we see our credit card statements or our bank statements, or we go online, and do this for at least 3 months. Also make a list of your irregular expenses, right? Which would be like gifts, donations. Always put aside for like a car, if you have a car or home repairs, maybe, things crop up, so always good to put it, list your irregular expenses. If you're one of those people that like to take a vacation, make a list of those expenses. And what we want to do is you want to total all your expenses at the end of the month. There's several softwares out there that make it easier to record and organize your expenses. And also, even when you look at your credit card statements, you can see on my credit card statements, I can see, okay, what was restaurants, what was pharmacies, what was food. So you can actually see from your credit card statements. So, very good place to start. So you have an idea of what you're spending. So the steps in preparing a budget, you add up all your monthly income, You identify your necessary expenses, and those would be the housing. If you have a housing, if you're paying rent, your mortgage, your utilities, groceries, any debt payments that you have, insurance, cell phones, and always keep savings in there, right? Savings, very important. Although we can talk about it as an expense, and I'll talk about it a bit later, but consider that as one of your expenses because you're putting money away. Identify your discretionary expenses, right? Those are the things that we do, but we don't have to do them. So that's like eating out, cable, cable may not even be something we need now because we can get everything off of YouTube. Like my kids, they're YouTube and all these various other places they get their movies from that I don't really want to hear about. What I know, the less I know, the better. But, movies, concerts, shopping, saving for vacation, that's discretionary. Things that you don't need to live, but you still do them because it's enjoyment. You add up all your monthly expenses and compare it to your income. So what are some of the sources of income that you might have? Most of us, our sources of income, our main source of income would be employment income, right? And when we're looking at employment income in terms of budgeting, what we're looking at is your net employment income. That is your income that you actually take home in your hand. So if you're getting $2,000 a month after they've taken out the taxes, and if you have to pay CPP and EI or any other things they may deduct from that what you finally get cash in your hand or directly deposited into your bank account, that is what we're looking at, your employment income. Okay, so it's your net. Some of us, I think a lot of companies don't give it anymore, but in days when bonuses, some of us may still be lucky enough to get a bonus. It may not be as big as we would normally get in prior years, but we can still, some of us are still some people are still, not myself, but some people are still getting bonuses, right? We know that maybe at a particular time of the year, sometimes April, whatever it is when the company determines, you may get bonuses. You may in a situation where you get tips. Maybe you have a part-time job in a restaurant and you get tips. Or you work on a commission. Maybe you work in a clothing store. You may have your base salary and you also get a percentage of your sales, or depending on what you do. So you're looking at that. You may have income in the form of investments. You may have government payments. Maybe you get the EI. You could get an unemployment income if you're entitled to that. You may get some of the Trillium benefits. You may get the GST credit that you get quarterly. And some of you may be little entrepreneurs that you may have your own business on the side. So you have your self-employment income. So this is all the income that you're going to be taking into consideration when you're doing your budgeting. Now, employment income, we know that we basically get the same thing every paycheck because we tend to work the same. If it's a full-time job, we're working the same amount of hours. If it's a job where it's a part-time job where our hours vary, so therefore our salaries vary, our bonuses will vary, our tips will vary, your investments will vary. You always be on the conservative side. So when you're budgeting, if you know that, 1 month I could make $50 on commissions and next month I'm going to make $500, be on the conservative side, right? Because you don't want to think that you have more money that you're working with than you actually do, because it can vary from month to month. Okay. Other sources of income may be work-related, retirement or disability pension, insurance payments, gifts, because I know with younger people, they like gifts. They like getting money for gifts because they don't want the gifts that you give them because this may not be what they want. You may have grants or scholarships. You may get royalties for something, or you may have rental income. So these are the various kind of sources of income that you may have in doing your budget. So the income part of your monthly budget, because I'll just look at it monthly, but you can do it quarterly, as I said, or you can do it yearly. You take all your income together. So you'll have your employment after deductions, and you'll have your other incomes. And again, you will also know that from month to month, I said it might change. But a job will be the main source of our income. And when your income changes from month to month, it's important that you update your budget. So a budget is evergreen, it's not stagnant. As your situation changes, you'll have to modify your budget if it's going to be meaningful. Okay, so let's look at some of the categories of expenses. We have fixed expenses. Those are the kind of expenses that are the same every month. So that will be things like your rent, your car payment. If you have a utility where you're on equal billing, that will be fixed payments that you make every month. You have variable expenses. Those are the ones that change. And variable expenses are those expenses are the ones that are easier to cut back when you need to cut back and make adjustments. You also have irregular expenses that come up throughout the year, and also unplanned expenses. And these surprise you and you really can't plan for those. So these are the kind of expenses that you know. So when unplanned expenses, although you can't necessarily know what they are, you may still want to put funds away for those unplanned expenses, whatever they may be, when they come up. So this is what like the fixed expenses would look like on your fixed expense portion of your budget. So you see housing, car payments, loans, we normally pay back the same amount every month, insurance. So these are some of the examples. You'll add all of your total fixed expenses together. And then this is what the variable expenses would look like. So these are some things that may change month to month. Groceries, right? It depends on what you're buying. Eating out, that changes from month to month. So clothing, footwear, you may not be, you don't spend a set amount every month. Depends on what your needs are or your spending habits. So these are some of the kind of things that we would consider variable or irregular expenses. And again, notice that there is savings there. Now, as I said it before, savings is not the same as the other expenses where when your money is gone, when you spend it. But it's good to think of savings as money you put aside so it's not available for spending. So it's basically paying yourself first, right? So it's considered an expense because you want to put it there, but it's money really that you're paying yourself first and you'll be using it for yourself in the future. So money for unexpected and emergency expenses should be saved in a special account where it is available when you need it. So be sure to include savings for an emergency fund or for future needs like ongoing education, if you have a mortgage. But savings should always be a part of your budget. Small savings add up fast and can be there for emergencies or unexpected expenses. What COVID has taught us is that we have to prepare for sudden loss of income by setting the money aside every month for an emergency fund and by knowing where to turn to for help. Another thing, one of the things that you can also, that I would say, always put in your budget is, Christmas time, or if you have certain celebrations of the year where money is given or you have to buy gifts. We know, say, for example, that Christmas is December 25th every year. And that December is traditionally a month where people go crazy when it comes to spending. And they dread getting their credit card bills or looking at their account come January when it comes in, because most people overspend when it comes to holidays, right? What's wrong with putting aside money every month, right? Put aside money in a savings account for your Christmas shopping. You're going to do it, right? So put that money aside, and then when come Christmas, you're not going to feel that crunch because you already have that money put aside. So simple things like that. So you'll add up your variable expenses and you'll add up your fixed expenses, and then you come to your total expenses, right? And you subtract your total expenses, which is included your fixed and your variable, from your income. And if you still have money, you're in a positive position, you're in a surplus position. So that's if your income exceeds your expenses, you're considered to be in a net surplus position. And if you have more expenses than income, then you are considered to be in a net deficit position. And where we want to be is we want to be in that net surplus position, right? Because if we're in that net deficit position, we're behind the 8 ball, so to speak, because our expenses are exceeding our income. So what we're going to have to do is we may have to make lifestyle adjustments. We're going to have to find a way to kind of like reduce those expenses so that we can live within our means. What I'm going to do in this session is I'm going to give you examples of ways that you can cut down on your expenses. And I'm also going to give you budgeting tips. So when you're talking about budgeting, it's more important to look beyond balancing expenses against income in the short term. You should look at how to manage your expenses to live within your budget, right? Because that's where we want to be. We want to be able to live, and we want to live well, but we also want to do it within our budget. So some of the budgeted methods, there's one called the 50-30-20 budget method, the envelope method, the pay yourself first method, and the zero-based budget. And I will go through each of these and talk about each of them individually. So what the 50-30-20 method, it basically, you divide your after-tax income into three portions, so to speak. 50% on your needs, 30% on your wants, and 20% of on your savings. So that's how you're going to be allocating your income, your after-tax income. Now, what's good about this system? It gives you room to pay down your debt, cover your costs, and save for future expenses. You can use this one by itself or as a baseline for other flexible budget methods, right? So this is one of the way you can say, okay, roughly this is how I want to allocate my income, and then you allocate your expenses within that allocation that you want. But notice there's that savings, so that's very important, having that savings in there, 20% of savings. There's also the envelope system, right? And with the envelope system, you have a series of, now this is the old-fashioned way, okay, of doing it. You get your envelopes, you put the different expenses on an envelope, and the cost based on, you've tracked your expenses over a period of time. You know, okay, my rent is $1,500. I put $1,500 in that envelope. I know my electricity is $100. I put that in my envelope. All your expenses, you put in a different amount in each of the envelopes, and you put what the amount in it and the type of expense, right? This method is good because it prevents a person from overspending money out of their pocket or bank account because it's already allocated to a bill. So say, for example, you have $500 for food a month and you have it there, and you choose to spend $450 for the first, for 3 weeks in the month. Well, you know what? You have $50 left that you're going to be spending for that last week. So do what you can, right? So that's the envelope method. So now this is the old-fashioned method, was probably what your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents would have used, putting them in the individual envelopes. This particular strategy can be adapted to multiple checking accounts in place of the envelopes, right? And there are a lot of banks that allow you to set up accounts, checking accounts without a minimum balance, right? So you can do that, you can do that as well. Another method is pay yourself first. This is designed to align your spending and your values. So this reverse budget puts savings before your immediate expenses. So you're going to pay yourself first. So with this system, you decide how much you're going to set aside for your monthly income for savings goals like retirement, emergency fund, and then the rest of the bills and other costs, right? So you don't have to crunch every number, but okay, I'm going to pay myself first. That's going to my savings, and whatever is left, based on my expenses, I'm going to have to modify everything else that I need, my needs, my wants, to live with whatever is left after I pay myself first. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be paying myself first. So I know I have that money in my savings every month. Okay. And the last method I'm going to talk about is a zero-based budget. Now, this does not mean spending every cent you have at the end of the month so you're left with zero. This method suits overspenders and detailed or meticulous planners. So it makes monitoring your expenses clear because you take your monthly income and you use every dollar in a deliberate way, like saving a certain amount for a trip, paying utilities and groceries. So you allocate every single dollar that you make to a specific expense until you're zero. It doesn't involve sending. You're going to still have okay, I'm going to spend, I make $1,000, $200 are going to go into my savings, and I'm going to allocate it so everything goes into a particular expense. And at the end of the day, whatever I've allocated is going to be zero, right? Your income less whatever I've allocated to my savings and other expenses, it's going to be zero. So tracking every dollar you earn and giving it a place in your budget until you don't have a dollar to spare. That's basically what it is. So it can show you where your money is going and give every dollar that you earn a purpose. So if you don't strictly use cash, as with the envelope method, you'll have to just log each expense to make sure that you're on budget, right? You want to make sure, always important, make sure that you're on budget. Now, as I mentioned before, there's several different apps available. You can use spreadsheet, but whatever works for you and is most comfortable for you. So now I'm going to talk about managing your expenses to live within your budget. Okay. What's important is if you'd like to have more money to spend, the first thing you need to know is the difference between your needs and your wants. Okay. What is a need? A need is a necessity, something required, something essential for life, right? Wants are non-essential items that we would like to have, but we don't need to have, right? So a need is, yeah, you want to have a roof over your head, you want to have food, that's a need, right? Clothing, medication, that's a need. A vacation is a want. I want to go on vacation. I want to go out and eat in a restaurant or order in food or Uber Eats. I want designer clothes. That's a want. Okay. Now remember, one person's want may be another person's need. For example, if I live on a bus route, you know, a car would be a want, right? If I live in the middle of nowhere and I want to get to work on time and there's no public transit, well, that car may be a need, right? One thing to remember is that needs and wants may change over time, but it's important to differentiate between needs and wants and to balance them in your life. The important thing is to find the balance so you can enjoy your life today and also prepare for your future. Another thing we also need to do is priorities, right? Priorities focus on things you really need and want. So it's all, you know, one helpful setting up a way to set spending priorities is the 1, 2, 3 system. So one is items that are essential for healthy living. For example, basic food, shelter, clothing. Two are items that are not essential, but they're important, you know, like maybe you need a transit pass, your cell phone. If you need to get to work, you may need a bicycle, may be important if it's within cycling distance where you work. And 3 are items that are not essential and not important. So, you know, if you want to go to the spa, download music, you know, eating, you know, in restaurants all the time, that's not essential. But priorities focus on things you really need and want. So set spending priorities so you'll have money for the things you really need and want. Now, remember, there's no right or wrong when it comes to defining your needs and wants and setting your priorities. For example, even though you may want to have lunch with your best friend every week, right? And that may be a want rather than a need, but it's important to you. So it's worth spending on. It's worth spending money on, right? If you can afford it. Now, you can still do that, right? You may want to have like a cheaper restaurant where you meet every week to spend time with your friend, because that's ultimately what you're doing. You're spending time. That's what you want to do. You want to spend time with your friend. So maybe you go for a coffee. Maybe you go as opposed to a full meal. It doesn't have to be a full meal every time, but you can still spend that time with your friends, right? One thing when you set a budget, you shouldn't feel deprived, right? You should definitely not feel deprived, because if you feel by setting a budget, you're deprived, you're not going to want to stick to it, right? So when you set a budget, don't make it that stringent that you can't do, because one thing about life is you need to live, right? And you need to enjoy your life. Another thing that we have to do is we have to understand our spending decisions, right? Now, there are many factors that influence how we spend, including emotions, habits, peer pressure, right? And you need to watch how these different factors affect your spending decisions so you can control them. I know that when I'm extremely happy, like if something happens really good to any of my family, I want to spend, right? I know that that's what triggers my spending, right? What is important? So I have to, you know, okay, it's a wonderful thing that's happening, but I have had to learn to control that, right? Because I would go and I would spend more than I should on something that I really don't need. But what I used to do is I'm spending because something as good is happening to my friend or my family. So I went, okay, I'm going to buy myself a piece of jewelry because I can associate it with when my son did this or my daughter did this or this happened, right? that's not the right thing to do, but I know what my triggers are. So what's important is that you should be aware of the personal factors like emotions, habits, and behaviors um, that affect your spending, right? And once you understand what they are, that can help you control your spending, right? But you have to be honest with yourself, right? You have to know yourself and know what triggers your spending. So before I go on, and I'm going to provide you with some budgeting tips and ways to cut expenses and what you should consider if you're ever in a situation where you have to replace your income, like if there's a job loss or you have a reduction in your income. But at this time, I'm going to hand it over to L.E.A.D so she can discuss the survey.
Yes, thank you, Astrid. So just before we continue, we just wanted everyone to please take a moment to scan the QR code on the screen to take our survey. Just a reminder again, once you fill it out, you'll be entered to win a raffle for an Amazon gift card. So we would also really just appreciate your opinion and how the event went and how to make things better in the future. I would also post the direct link to the survey in case you don't have a phone to scan the picture. So yeah, thank you, Astrid.
Let me know when to go ahead.
You can go ahead.
I can go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. So successful budgeting tips. Okay, so we want to be successful in doing our budgeting. So I'm going to give you with some successful budgeting tips, right? You should create your budget before the month begins, right? You should also use the right tools, whether it's a budgeting app, whether it's online budgeting tools that are available to you. What's important is that you establish the difference between your needs and your wants. Um, and we know, again, needs are anything crucial for your basic physical, mental, and financial well-being, food, rent, debt repayment. Um, what is also good is you should automate your essential recurring living expenses. That's a good thing to do because if you get that money taken out, you don't have that money available to you to spend, right? So it's always good to automate any payments that you have because sometimes it's very tempting if the money is sitting in your account to spend it. But if it comes out immediately, then you know it's not there to spend. So that can help you. Keep all your bills and receipts in an organized way because from time to time, you may want to go back to look at these bills and receipts to check to see if you're on the right path or to make adjustments to your spending. Where can I eliminate? So it's important to track your expenses, and I can tell you when you track your expenses, you'll be surprised how much, not only how much you spend, but how much you spend on things that you don't really need, right? So tracking your expenses is always good. Track your expenses, Again, you can use separate bank accounts, right? Where you can put the money in different bank accounts. So you know that this bank account, maybe your bank account, where you will use if you go for lunch with your friends or what you would have your fun money, put that in a separate bank account. So okay, when that fun money is done, it's done, right? So it's not with your other money because then there's temptations to okay, well, I'll pay back Paul, take from Peter to pay to Paul, so to speak. But if you take that money, okay, the fun money, put that separately. If you have like the envelope method, but with bank accounts, and they said there's some banks that you don't have to have a minimum balance, that's something that you should do. One thing that we should all do is try and prioritize our debt payments, right? Because to reduce interest, and also prioritize our debt repayment because this can affect your credit score, right? So if you have debt, you should always have some kind of debt reduction plan, right? It was really funny the other day, a couple of years ago, myself and my husband, we did some renovations on our kitchen and at Home Depot. And I said, it was really good because we had 24 months to pay back Home Depot for the loan. Okay. And it was interest free. So, okay, great idea. Let me use that Home Depot. And, I said, okay, I set out a spending plan, a payment plan. So I knew that before the 24 months was out, I would have paid it. So I was paying more than the minimum balance. So when there was about $1,500 left on my credit card bill going to Home Depot, I decided to have a look. And the minimum payment was $15. Can anybody put into the chat how many years you think it would have taken me to pay off that $1,500 at $15 minimum? Tell me what you think. So let me know what some of the answers are. How much do you think, how long do you think it would have taken me to pay off $1,500, paying the minimum balance of $15 a month?
Okay, so so some people said 25, 30, 8.3. Someone said forever.
You're right. Who said the actual amount was 26 years.
Wow.
26 years to pay off $1,500. In that time, I would have been able to do the renovations for my kitchen based on the interest probably 3 times over. But 26 years to pay off $1,500, right? So, and a lot of people get caught up in paying the minimum balance on things because it's, okay, I don't have to pay you back right away. And they don't realize how much money it actually costs, right? Always include that contingency category, include that emergency savings category, have a miscellaneous category for those expenses that don't fit necessarily into any of the other particular categories in your budget. But do not use it to overspend in any of the other categories because you have that, right? It's definitely there for your savings, and it's only when needed you will go into that, right? Again, the unexpected expenses, your cars, we know cars break down. We know, you take your car to the mechanic and you're probably not leaving until it's $1,000 later, right? We know that. Put that money aside. A car is just an example. You may not have a car, but there are other things that crop up in life that you may need to spend. So cannot stress enough the importance of having an emergency savings. Right now, interest rates are the lowest it has ever been, right? When I look to see what interest rates are, interest rates on a savings account, on most savings accounts, are less than 0.05%, okay? That may be low, but if you are borrowing money, okay, what you have to pay to borrow is a lot more than that. So that's incentive to have money that if an unexpected bill comes up, you can pay that off. You may not be getting a lot of money on it, but you're not going to pay the interest if you have to borrow. Like credit lines, the percentage that you're going to be paying on a credit line can be about 3.45%. If you have a credit card, the interest that they're charging you is 10 to 30%. And, I know some of you may be tempted, you see those advertisements all the time or advertisements all the time of payday loans. Great idea. Do you know what a payday loan interest you could pay on a payday loan? What do you think? And that's another question. What do you think the percentage they can charge you on a payday loan? What percentage interest do you think would be that they could possibly charge you on a payday loan? You see the advertisements all the time, and it's very tempting, right? Especially if you're in a crunch and you need money right away. But how much do you think it could be on a payday loan? What do you see in L.E.A.D? What kind of percentages?
So I see 10%, 5%, 15%.
Do you know what a payday loan could be?
30% as well.
It can be up to 400%. Okay, 400%, right? So yeah, you can get the money quickly, but let me tell you, whatever you need it for can cost you 4 times what it should have cost you because you don't have the money and you're up against the wall because you don't have savings to do what you need to do, right? So just, those things you have to be aware of, right? Because, a lot of people spend unnecessarily on incur debt unnecessarily and don't realize the repercussions of having to go paying back that kind of debt, the kind of interest that they have to pay on that, right? Plan your variable expenses, right? Those variable expenses, those are expenses that vary from month to month. Those are what you can adjust, right? If I know that, okay, I'm eating out a lot this month, I have a lot of friends that have birthdays and we're going to be doing things. Okay, so I may want to cut back in next month or the month before because I know what's coming. Because I know I'm going to be out a lot this year. I'm going to have to buy gifts for friends because I have a lot of friends that have birthdays in June. So plan, plan your variable expenses, right? Always revisit your budget as needed, right? So review your spending habits. Remember to adjust as your income adjusts, right? It's not static, it's evergreen, right? Adjust your budgets monthly to take into account, as I said, different festivals, your Christmas, if you normally have to do your tune up of your car or whatever, your winterizing of your car or taking off your winter tires, or that may call, budget for all of that, going back to school, you're gonna have to pay for books, you're gonna have to pay for tuition, right? Adjust your money, adjust your budget, right? Budget for your annual, your semi-annual expenses, right? In setting your budget, right? Outline specific realistic goals, right? Use the SMART principle, right? You want them to be specific, you want it to be measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely, right? So when we're setting goals, financial goals, those are what we want to do. So don't say, okay, I want to save more, right? What you want to say is, I want to save $1,000 by the end of October. Be specific when you're talking, right? Specific and realistic, right? So you want it to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Very important when you're setting goals, right? Because if it's not attainable, you're not even going to bother to try because you're going to fail before you even start, right? Very important in setting goals. And always have your short-term goals, your mid-range goals, and your long-term goals. Right? As I said, it's always good to save first and then spend. Pay yourself first. That's a good habit to get into. Automate your savings, right? Just like how you could automate recurring expenses, automate your savings. So whatever you decide that you're going to be saving, it comes out as soon as your paycheck goes in, you have an automatic going into your savings account. So you don't even see it. It's not there. It's out of reach. You're not going to see it. You don't have to touch it, right? It's never too early to start contributing to your retirement, right? You remember, people are living longer now, right? And you have heard that people say, okay, maybe you young people, by the time you get to the age when you're receiving your pension, there may not be a pension, right? Because people are living longer, right? So you have to look out for yourself or what you're going to be doing, when you get older. Plan for your large expenses, split your direct deposit, as we said, your savings, your expenses, split your various deposits, plan for your large expenses, save for those big purchases a little bit at a time. It doesn't hurt as much when you're putting money aside, One thing to do is be content and quit comparisons. You'll never have as much money as the next person, right? And the last thing you want to do is be comparing yourself to anybody else. You know what you have, you know what your responsibilities are, you know what your obligations are. So be content with what you have and quit comparisons. If you have a problem in managing credit cards, you know what? Cut up your credit cards, get rid of them. I remember my brother, my brother was in university, he had a friend, Roger, and he said, Astrid, help Roger, because Roger, his friend, he was at Ryerson, he was a student, he was like in his third year, and his credit card was like over $10,000, and he had nothing to show for it. And Roger gave me his cards, and I took his cards, and I kept his cards. So he was able to manage his debt because he could, as long as he had those credit cards, he was spending, right? Save your money for essentials, right? So the things that you need, right? That's where you want to save your money. Save your money for essentials. And when you're looking at doing spending cuts, focus on those non-essential things. It's easier to cut back on non-essentials, right? So, and remember, even small savings add up over time. If you save $5 a day, at the end of the year, you have $1,800. You have over $1,800. So you may not be saving a lot of money in one big lump sum, but little amounts, they add up over time, and you'll be surprised at how quickly those amounts add up. What's important is that you make a schedule and you stick to it, right? Commit to that spending plan. Now, don't be too hard on yourself because it takes a few months to make things perfect. But focus on making daily decisions with your budgeting goals in mind to establish these new habits. Remember, it takes 21 days to establish a habit. So, stick to it, right? It may take you 3 to 4 months to get a handle on things, right? But give yourself grace. We all make mistakes, right? You'll get it. Right? So don't be too hard on yourself. One thing though, don't forget to factor in that fun, right? Budget for fun. Put money aside for doing the things that you like to do, that you enjoy. Reward yourself, right? Because you're working, you're making money, or even if you're in school and you're getting an allowance or you have a part-time job, you're working. But you want to enjoy it. You just don't want to say, okay, well, can't do this. I have to budget. No, you don't want to because you're not going to stick to it. If all you think of, I can't do anything, I can't spend my money because all I need to do, I have to budget. No, right? You don't do that. Always factor in that fun. And most importantly, be accountable, right? Because whether you stick to it or not, the only person that you're really accountable is yourself. So be accountable when it comes to that. I'll just go over a couple of tips to reduce reduce your expenses, right? Do it yourself, right? This is a do it yourself age. I'm finding that myself and my husband are doing things around the house that we never thought about doing in the past. And we're saving money, YouTube videos. It's amazing what people have learned to do on YouTube videos, right? You can learn a lot from YouTube video. You Google it. I'm fascinated myself with things I'm learning by Google it, watching YouTube videos. That'll save you money. Eat at home, right? A lot of the times, and we've learned to eat at home now, especially in COVID times, right? But still, some of us are caught up in this Uber Eats, right? I was talking to a friend and she was saying, her son spent like $400 a month in 1 month for Uber Eats, right? Why? You have food at home, you can go to the supermarket, eat at home. That'll cut down expenses. Be a smart shopper, right? Be a savvy shopper, buy on sale, buy in bulk, right? Or package discounts, right? I know I use the Flip app a lot. I price match for those places that still price match. So I use that. I look at my Flip app to see what I have on sale. I price match all the time, I don't do it, but extreme couponing, I watched that show a couple of times. It was fascinating how when they go to the cashier and they give all the coupons and it was like, wow, all of that. And that's all they have to pay. But that's a way of saving money, cut out anything that you don't use, right? Because a lot of us say come January after Christmas, we overeat, we join a gym, we go for the first 2 months and then we don't go back, right? So did we really need that membership in the first place, right? Or if you can join a gym, but not lock yourself into that 12 months, right? So things that you don't use, you can cut out. Avoid impulse buying, right? When you see something that you really don't need, ask yourself, do I really need it, right? When I go shopping, have a shopping list and stick to your list. I find that whenever time I go into the supermarket and I do not have a shopping list, I will never leave that supermarket without having at least 3 or 4 items that I did not intend to buy, right? So when you go shopping, have that shopping list, right? It may be good to even get into the habit of having an observe a no spend day, right? A day where you don't spend any money unless it's absolutely necessary, right? And we can do it. Like one thing that COVID times have taught us, I can tell you before COVID, I was working near the Scarborough Town Center. And I can tell you every single day I was at work, I was in the Scarborough Town Center. And 9 times out of 10, I was either in Bath and Body Works. Practically every day I was in Walmart because it was convenient. And I would never go in that mall and not come out with a package of some types. Since COVID has hit and I'm working from home, I haven't even been to Walmart 5 times since March of last year, right? But if I was there, I would be there at least 3-4 times a week. I was in Walmart, right? So, we can cut out things, right? Find cheap recreation. We've all had to do that now because we're in lockdown, right? So things that we used to do, we don't have to spend that whole heap of money that we used to have to do in the past. One thing that I did this weekend I had never done before, my daughter and I, we went hiking. We were gone for 3 hours, went to 3 conservation area. a lot of good times, a lot of bonding, a lot of jokes, a lot of laughs, and for free, right? And the place was only 5 minutes away from my house. I had not been to this place in over 15 years, and I had one of the best times I'd ever had, right? So we can find time to have fun that's a lot cheaper. Just by making these easy lifestyle changes, it can make a big difference, right? So
Sure.
let's see what the message is. Budgeting is an ongoing activity, right? It's comparing your income to your expenses. Where we want to be is we want to be in that surplus position where our income exceeds our expenses. We want to repay our debt. We also want to increase our savings, right? When we do our budget and we see that we're in a deficit, we want to adjust our lifestyle. We want to reduce our spending or find ways of increasing our income, right? What's important is that you stay focused on your financial goals, and I can guarantee you will be thankful, and you will be successful, and you'll be really happy of having this knowledge where it takes you. Um, One last slide that I want to do is many of us in these times, and I added this one because of COVID, where many of us have either lost our jobs, many of us have had reduced income, and we've had to work with a lot less, right? And one thing, this acronym, MAP OUT, this is things that you should consider in a situation where you have had that kind of situation. So the M is for magnitude of the problem. How bad is your situation, right? How much income do I need to make up? Is it short term or is it long term, right? The A in the acronym is assets you can draw on. So what cash and savings do you have? What investments or assets could you sell if necessary? Or what personal skills or talents could you use? It's always good in these situations to avoid loans if possible, because in situations where you don't know when your next job may be, it could make things worse. Peer priorities, right? What are the most important things to spend on and protect, right? So we know that's like your health, healthy eating, health care, your mortgage, right? Or options to make ends meet. Where can you cut spending? Can you eliminate some expenses? Can you reduce some expenses? What expenses could you put off until later, right? How could you raise more income in the short term or in the long term, right? Um, can community resources help, right? Community or government programs, support networks, etc. How could they help, right? The U is for unexpected emergencies. So what unexpected emergencies are likely to come up? Can you avoid them by planning ahead or even buying insurance that might cover them? Or can you set aside even a little for emergencies, even as hard as the times that you're currently going through? But these are things that we have to think about. And the last one, T, is for timeline for managing your cash flow, right? What income can you count on? What must you spend on in the next month? How long will your assets last if you cut spending to a minimum? And how long will your situation continue? So these are all things that I thought this was really good, because the pandemic has as I said, has affected all of us in one way or another, or people that we know or ourselves personally. So these are things that we have to consider. And I thought, let me share this with you because I really think it's important, especially at this time. So that is it for my presentation. I really want to thank you for your time and spending with me this evening. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Astrid. We actually do have a question.
Sure.
So Simi asked in the chat, did you do the no spend day once a week?
Me, I began to do that no day. You know what? I did it on a day when I would be more likely to spend, right? Which is like on a Friday going into a weekend, right? So that was when I did that no spend day, right? On days where because a lot of times Sundays, okay, we're at home, right? So it's not really any sacrifice, but on that Fridays, that's where, a lot of Fridays I don't work. So that's the time when I would be out and about, but that was the time when I implemented that. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, so Alex asked, are there any methods of passive income you would recommend for those who can't put a lot into building it?
One of the passive, one of the most common passive income that people can do, and one that I have personally invested in, is rental properties, right? Um, that is a passive source of income that a lot of people use because, a lot of the times if the rent, if you're lucky, you can be in a position where the rent will cover most of those expenses. And so you actually do have a net at the end of the day, right? And even if you may have a little deficit at the start, for tax purposes, you can write off that income against your that loss against your regular income, right? So there is that tax benefit, right? And just like that gentleman that I brought to your attention, that 25-year-old, right? It doesn't have to be in Toronto where you invest, right? It does not have to be in Toronto where you invest, right? Because we know real estate in Toronto is very expensive, right? Compared to other places, I purchased a place in Florida, and a nice condo in Florida a couple of years ago, less than 2 years ago. It was 150 US. I could never get that in Toronto, right? So, it doesn't, if you're looking at passive income and investing, or to get that passive income, it doesn't have to be in Toronto, right? And there are people that can manage your property. Yes, you'll have to pay them, but at least they're on the ground running, that they can do whatever needs to be done should your tenants need anything there. So, that is the best, that's what I can say is a way of, that passive income where, yeah, repairs come along every now and again. That's true. Again, for tax purposes, because it's you're gaining income with it, you can write off those expenses to come down to your net income. So, the most common one that most people do would be that rental property, the rental property,
There's a
or
follow-up
any
question
kind
to
of
that.
rental, right? So it may not be necessary property, like a house, but you may have something where you may buy an item that people want and people will want to rent from you, right? So as long as you have that item, there's not much you have to do. People rent it and you're getting the income from it.
Thank you. That was, so it was supposed to be a follow-up question to that, but you already answered it.
Oh,
She was
okay.
asking, what if you can't afford to buy a
Yeah,
property?
it doesn't have to be property.
Yeah.
It really doesn't have to be property, right? It is what you do your research, and is what is it that people want, right? Right. So what is it? Anything that you rent is you have it there. You have the asset that you can rent out to people. So if you don't have that big heap of money to as I said, to buy a property, not a problem. It can be something else that people want.
Mm-hmm. Someone else asked, what apps do you recommend for budgeting?
There's no specific apps. All of them are pretty good. Some of the banks have apps, right? And all of them are pretty good, right? And as I said, once you know what you're looking at, there's no specific one that I recommend, but once you know it, the app is not the big deal. It's what you do with it, right? So knowing what your income is, your expenses are. I'm old school personally, so I use Excel spreadsheet, right? So I can see it, I can track it, I can, that's what I use personally, because I'm old school, and I'm as Alamdi will tell you, I'm technology challenged. I admit that. So I use Excel spreadsheet. So I'm a little bit past the paper and pencil, but I do use the Excel spreadsheet, right? But banks have them. The banks have the apps, and a lot of them are free apps. So there's several ones out there. There is even one, there's Canada. Canada has Financial Canada. They have one as well. FCAC, Financial Literacy. I think it's Financial Literacy Canada. They have one as well. So there are a lot of different apps out there, and they're all good.
Another question was, do you advise that it's better to pay off the balance on your credit card other than the minimum?
Definitely, if you can, do not pay. If you can, pay more than that minimum. As I told you, that example, paying $15 on a $1,500 balance that I owed would have taken me 26 years to pay off, right? And that's how the banks get you. They know that if you just pay the minimum, and we get into that comforted feeling where, well, I only have to pay the minimum, right? And that's not very much. But when you really think about, the item that you bought, And if you pay the minimum, and one, not only how long it will take for you to pay back, but also the interest that you pay on that, you could buy that item 10 times over,
Yeah.
right? By the time you pay that off, the item may not even be around anymore or working, right? So really, if you're gonna, credit cards can be good, but you want to use them wisely. And unless you're in a dire need, I would recommend, don't put on your credit card what you can't pay off when the end of the month comes, unless you are, you know, I don't have money for my rent. I don't have money to pay my mortgage, or it's a need. And it's either this or you don't know where you're going to get that money from, right? But always a good habit to get into is don't put more on your credit card than what you can afford to pay off at the end of the month. That's how banks draw you in. And a lot of people get drawn in, and it's just the cycle. And when you're doing all of this, and I know some of you may have attended our session on credit, but when you're doing all of this is affecting your credit score, right? So you may say, okay, I'm paying it off, but if you're paying off minimum, if you ever go to the bank to get a loan, the type of loan that you're going to get on what I may get, say for 2% on a loan, you may have to pay 10% because they see your credit history and your history of only making minimum payments. So although it may not seem bad to you now, and if you're a student, or if you're whether a university student, or once you leave high school and you go into university, one of the first things that you do when they get to university is these credit cards companies will hound you, right? Especially coming up close to graduation, they may give you these deals where it's a low percentage of interest for a particular period of time, and then it goes back up to the regular rate. So you want to be very aware of that, right? So credit cards, they can be good. I use my credit cards because I have a PC credit card, and I use it, and I pay, but I pay off every month, and I use it to get my free groceries. Every couple of months, I get $120 in free groceries because I know it's something I'm going to eat or my family's going to eat. I can use that, but I never carry a balance. I don't, so try and get into that position where you don't have to carry a balance. If you put it on there, you're going to pay it off. And my son, he's in university in Ottawa, and he has a credit card, and he wants to build up his credit. He's going to his 4th year in university, and what he does is he uses his credit card regularly, but his statements come here, and he tells me to open up his statements. And when I look at his statements, he's paid off what if he goes to Walmart, which is across the street, to buy his groceries, he gets back home, goes onto his computer, and pays off what he bought in groceries. So he doesn't carry a balance. And that is a habit that you want to get into. Don't use it as a crutch. Just, oh, well, it's free money. My cousin once said to me when I was in university and I was in Montreal, she said, I love this. I got a credit card. This is free money. And I'm saying, no, it's not. You have to pay it back. Banks love people like you that think that you can just run up a credit card and you only have to pay minimum balance. You don't realize what you're saying, right? But it was a rude awakening for her when I explained to her how it works, how the credit cards work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Another question is hiring someone the best method if you buy a property far from where you live?
You know what? There are property managers. A lot of them may be, they charge like maybe a percentage of the rent that you get, or 1 month of the rent. If it's far away from where you are, that is probably the best thing if you don't have someone that you can rely on in the area, right? Because things happen, and when it comes to properties, things happen. Repairs need to be done. So that is the best way to do it. I know as I said, we have a place that's in the States, and we don't have a property manager, but when we were there, one of my friends had a place in the same complex where we bought. So we got their connections of people that could do things, and we were lucky to find someone that actually worked on the property who does handiwork and things on the side. So that's how we have done it should things arise. And with the internet and things, you can also when before we got this person, something needed to be done, and I Googled it, and I looked for the references of the person, and recommendation, and I did, but it was kind of like the blind, and I looked out. But it's always good if you're far or you can't visit regularly, that you have someone that looks over your property to make sure, because you can have great tenants and you can have tenants from I couldn't say the word, but they have tenants that really, you know, you don't want, right? So it's important to have someone there. A lot of times if it's far away and you need to get a tenant, the people that would manage your property, they would do all the vetting, right? So they'll vet the person, they'll do the credit checks, they'll do the references all for you. So that saves you a lot. So it could really help you in the long run.
Mm. Thank you, Astrid.
You're welcome.
Last question. It says, what sort of risk do you advise is reasonable when investing or trying to gain more income?
No, that's a very good question, but that's not, you have to know your own risk. Okay. I know that I am credit averse, right? And I know what my risk, I don't have to get rich quickly. I don't have to make a lot of money. A little interest would be nice with my investments, or I don't have to, I'm not looking to get rich quickly, right? Because the more potential that you can make, the higher the risk, right? You've heard people that were in this Forex, you hear about Forex all the time, right? You hear about cryptocurrencies, right? You can make a truckload of money on cryptocurrencies, but you could also lose a truckload. You could be up one day and you can be down one day, right? So I can't say which one is best for you to invest, because you have to know what risk you're willing to accept personally, and you have to know your risk level. I know in the we did a seminar, it was done by Pierre Tomacek a couple months ago, and he talked about that. And there, in his presentation, he talked about, there were different questions. There was a questionnaire that he went through, and he did, you know, for you to evaluate what your risk was based on, you know, several factors or several questions. And I know that seminar is available on our site, on our YouTube site. And so if you want to, you know, go through, that'd be a great presentation for you to access. But it's not a thing that I can say go for this or go for that, because I don't know what your risk tolerance is. Like, you know, I don't like to lose money. I don't have to make a whole heap, but I definitely don't like to lose money. So me personally, I don't invest in shares and companies. You know, I do have shares in my RRSP, and that I leave that up to my I have an investment advisor that runs that. I've been lucky to have, and is very good, and she manages it, and I'm happy. I can also tell you when COVID hit, and I'm not a rich person, but when COVID hit, the statement after COVID hit properly, and I got my investment, I nearly had a heart attack. My investment had gone down like $40,000 in between the month before, right? And I just had to keep reminding myself, okay, you're in it for the long run, breathe. And then gradually it went back up, and it's even a little bit higher than it was back last year. So, but I can tell you, I was not happy at all when I saw that drop. Like, it was like, right? So, but you really have to know what your risk is and what you're willing to, you know, what feels good to you.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much, Astrid. This was amazing. And thank you all for your amazing questions. I'm sure we all learned a lot from the conversation. And just a reminder again to fill out our feedback survey, and the recording for the event with the slides will be sent to those who participated, so you can be on the lookout for the email. I'll post the link to the feedback survey once again, just so we can all fill it out. We appreciate the feedback and just for ideas for what to host next.
And before we go, I just want to let you know that we will be having 3 seminars over the summer, financial seminars, one in June, one in July, and one in August. And they're going to be 3 really, really good seminars. The person that will be doing them is from the Credit Counseling of Canada, Amanda Martin, and a couple of them I have attended. And when I attended them, because I'm also the director for the financial program for the L.E.A.D organization. And when I attended these sessions, I was like, we have to have them come, and we have to have them, you know, I have to have them come and give the presentation. So Really look forward to seeing you guys in the next 3 seminars over the summer. Again, one in that you'll get emails from Alamedy. We'll send out some emails on those upcoming seminars, but I can tell you they're going to be very good. So look forward to seeing you there as well. And thanks again for your time this evening. Really, really appreciate it.